the Eye Test with Eric and Brady. We've got another fabulous guest today. We're going to talk about sports from a little bit different perspective with me as a photographer, Brady as a writer. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. All right, well, welcome back to the Eye Test. I'm Eric. Brady's here with me as usual. We don't have a guest this week, so we're just going to kick around a few things that we've been talking about. We were just talking about it before we started recording. This whole and I've been thinking about it, and we've been talking about it a little bit for a while. I've been wondering, and it came up again. Let me preface by saying it came up again with the Casey Thomas transfer, and it really made me think about it again. This idea that for most college teams, unless you are the top two or three, for most college teams, the difference between your starter and your second string is getting wider because of the transfer portal. Because those number twos, those number two quarterbacks, those number two or three running backs, those, number two defensive linemen are leaving because they can go somewhere else and play and start. And I'm wondering if that's going to be a side symptom of an unintended consequence of the transfer portal.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, especially now that there's been a couple of cycles to see it through. And obviously everything, it's not monolithic, it obviously It varies by kid. You're seeing some people like Casey Thompson, last year's starter, transferred. Of course, this is two starters in a row of starting quarterbacks at Nebraska who decided to transfer and not return for the following season at Nebraska. Obviously, extenuating circumstances within the program happening there. But you're also seeing there are programs like Florida, programs like Wisconsin, programs like Mississippi that brought in multiple transfers with experience. Even Nebraska this last year and in the spring camp had 6 quarterbacks that had played major Division I snaps. I mean, that's significant.
Right.
You see the Bo Nixes of the world who, for whatever reason, I would almost equate to an Adrian Martinez, a guy who's got great athleticism and tangibles, can work, doesn't work out where he's at, or it doesn't hit that potential that they see. Transfers, and Bo Nix ended up having a great season at Oregon. You've got Michael Penix, had a great season at Washington. You're just seeing it's a little bit different because the traditional, sit and learn kind of style of things just doesn't go over as well anymore. I don't think that I don't want to call it a misconception, because I think there are instances you could point to and say, this kid wants to play. He transferred because he wants to play. Whereas, 10 years ago, that wasn't as readily available of an option to just transfer. Because
Well, you knew going into college that, especially, back in the day with Nebraska, you knew that if you saw the field by your junior year, you were on track. Yeah. If you saw it your sophomore year, you were phenomenal. Yeah. Right. And offensive linemen, you just didn't see the field unless it was a 60-7 blowout. You just didn't see the field a whole lot. So yeah, it's a different world, but it just got me thinking that I think, I don't know. And maybe it's just, the fishbowl that we're looking at, that I see, especially at the quarterback position, everybody was like super excited this year that not maybe that so much that there was going to be a quarterback battle, but that there was all of a sudden quarterback depth.
Yeah.
Right? And you look at the running back room and you went, a couple guys leave, still by far the deepest room on the team, even with a couple guys leaving. But it just got me, and maybe, like I said, maybe it's just I look at that quarterback room that's got me thinking this a lot, and as I look around at other schools, the way people move around, that we might just have to get used to the idea that there aren't going to be too many places with a really quality number two that you can count on.
Yeah. Well, and it's especially difficult because Nebraska saw the importance of depth at the quarterback position last year. Casey goes down and Chuba performs well in practice. We've seen Chuba perform well in practice.
Right.
And you like,
But for some reason, it just doesn't translate to the field.
Yeah.
But then you had other people who clearly weren't scoring as well in practice.
Yeah.
They when they graded things out, so they were the number 3 or number 2, come into a game like Smothers and just gamed it.
Yeah.
And did well in the heat of battle. And that kind of dovetails me into something else that I think we talk about quite often, is that idea of, and I think Matt does this, which is why he doesn't worry about the stars on a recruiting thing, about recruiting the right mentality over the right athleticism.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, granted, he wants speed. He wants guys that, but he also, I get the feeling that he's recruiting a mentality type, like a gamer, you know, and that's why DB says it all the time when we were talking about Casey, was that, Casey may not have like all the skills that Sims has physically, but it, as DB put it, was like it made you uncomfortable that he wasn't on the field, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Casey did a good job of demonstrating that he was a pretty good starter. He could run the team. He may not be the most physically talented quarterback out there, but he certainly was. I would have put him in one of the top quarterbacks mentally.
Yeah, because he had that. I mean, his dad was a great college quarterback,
Right.
And obviously that's transferred on to Casey. He's learned a lot
grew
from
up
that.
with it.
He grew up with it. He's got years of experience at Texas. I mean, he had that. He's clearly knowledgeable. Shoot, he just graduated with his master's degree
Right.
last December, so he's knowledgeable, and his teammates complimented him on being one of the first ones in, last ones out of the room, learning throughout all the spring. Clearly knowledgeable of what he's doing, but at the same time, and there's something to be said for that. There's no replicating that
Right.
sort of knowledge of commanding a room, especially considering what he did last year in the first year of a system
Right.
under Mark Whipple. But Matt Rule and even Marcus Satterfield, their work system together, PJ Walker, Charlie Brewer tried to combine them. That would have been a heck of a quarterback. Casey asked about them. He contacted them right after Matt Rule got introduced,
Right.
and asked them, what's it going to be like? He tried being that cerebral guy that wanted to know everything about it, asked around, and then they really like a more mobile, a more threatening runner. And looking back last year, there's one true scramble I remember Casey doing where I was like, oh, okay. And then there was the other one in Ireland where he scrolls out to the right, or to his left, plants his foot and heaves it. Like, that sort of athleticism and gamesmanship is kind of tough to. You open up potential so much more for danger to be able to do that. And like Matt had said after the spring game, Jeff Sims is not a runner. He's a thrower who runs a 4.40.
Right.
Like, there's a difference in that. And not to take anything away from Casey or even take anything away from Jeff and how he manages a game and how he, mentally takes it all in, and how cerebral he can be in studying the game and being that commander and leader of a team. Because he does seem like he's got some leadership mentalities now, and he's taking some ownership of the team. I'm sure that he takes more of it now after Casey's gone. But I completely agree. There's something there, and there's something to be said for the experience that being a quarterback gives you in that environment. I mean, you're to the point about kids don't want to sit. They've been the stud of their high school or Pee Wee team since they were in 6th grade, and they think, I just got recruited. I'm going to usurp the starter. I'm going to do this. Sometimes that doesn't work out, and sometimes that's not a bad thing. I mean, having to sit and learn and soak it all in.
Stetson Bennett for him. I mean, yeah, stick and stay and make it pay, right? I mean,
well, he was there and then he left and then he came back and then. Yeah, next thing you know, you got a 26-year-old quarterback who's throwing dimes on 19-year-olds in playoff games.
Yeah. Yeah. There was something else I was going to say.
I know
Now
you.
I don't.
You had it on the tip of your tongue.
It was right there, and I lost it. All right. Did we cover that thing pretty well?
I think so. Well,
I mean, because
here's another thing.
I mean, the transfer portal is so freaking complicated as to try and make heads or tail of it, of unintended consequences from it.
There's so many different, because again, we talk about portal, talk about Nebraska and how we look at it from a Nebraska perspective because we're in Nebraska, we cover Nebraska, but there's so many different ways of going at it. Like for example, Georgia recruits, they're going to get the best recruits, like period. They're going to be the home of the 5 stars, them in Alabama. They have been one of the top 2-3 recruiting classes for years. It's not like they're going to stop. I mean, Nebraska just got 3 Georgia transfers.
Right. And they're gonna replace those guys with next man up.
And
Because they got the machine rolling down there.
And what did MJ Sherman say when asked about why do you come here? He said opportunity. Because what happens if he has a bad day? He doesn't have time to have a bad day over there. Avery Gilbert was a freak, like a genetic freak coming out of high school from Marietta. Sorry, trying to pull that off the top of my head. I can't remember how to pronounce that. From Georgia, goes to LSU, pops out, immense athlete, and then he transfers and goes to Georgia, and then he doesn't really see the field that much at Georgia, despite being one of the best graded tight end recruits in the country, because he needed a support system. He didn't need to go to the machine that chews up stars and is going to, you're going to be a great athlete. If you shine at Georgia, you're one of the best in the country. But he needed a support system. And that's something that Matt Rule and his staff offer now. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's just different ways of going about it. Georgia's just going to chew people through. If you shine, great. If you don't, they're going to keep getting 5 stars in, and you've got to compete for everything.
Right.
Which, not to say that it's good or bad, it's just how it is. Versus Colorado trying to basically flip an entire team in a portal.
Oh my gosh.
They had people transfer in December through the portal that are transferring out now in the spring window. That's the most alarming part to me, but it's just a different way of saying different people in different programs approach the portal in different ways.
Well, Colorado's not doing it a different way. They're doing it they're trying to do it in a way that's never been done.
Exactly.
And it's not just a different way. It's like a holy crap, really kind of way.
Well, it's the kind of way that's going to say, boy, that Amazon series is really going to be must-watch TV, isn't it? Come watch Coach Prime or whatever the heck it's called.
I don't know how deep we want to get into it. This story that everybody is talking, the Colorado story that everybody's talking about. But man, I just don't see. I don't see it. I don't see. I was texting with Rob the other night, and I just was saying I don't see how you create a team with a with a we mentality, with a coach with a leader that has a me mentality.
Yeah,
and right? And that's going to be I just still think it's going to be a dumpster fire.
Yeah, I don't.
It's going to be great. Amazon Prime TV must watch.
It's going to be must watch TV, but I don't know that it's going to.
I don't know that it's going to come out on the field.
Because the issue is, where's that cohesion at? And plus, if you're a player, of course, they're trying to just full scale, like flip a roster. They've only got some like less than 20 scholarship players that stayed on from last season to now. What happens if you're like one of the guys that and credit David Ubben, I think, wrote the story about it that basically said if you weren't one of Deion's guys in there, he didn't talk to you.
Right.
Even if you tried to say hi to him, he just wouldn't have the time for you. And one of those young men, it was a legacy. Like his dad played at Colorado. He was there on scholarship, but he had played like 2 years at Colorado, and he is basically given the boot and said, you're going to transfer. Those are the kinds of people, again, to go back, not to say it's Nebraska versus Colorado where there's only 2 ways of doing it, but that's a prime example of why do you treat somebody like that? That doesn't sit well with me personally.
Well, yeah, it doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
And 2, that's the kind of person that you want to build a program with. someone where the University of Colorado and not
Right.
Coach Prime with the Buffalo logo on it, that says more to him because he's going to fight for the for Colorado.
Directly goes back to what we were talking to Rob about.
Yeah.
Right. The local buy-in, that you have to have a certain amount of, and what percentage did he put? He put it at like 40% or something, like maybe higher.
Yeah. Sorry, Rob, I can't remember right now.
Yeah,
it was a long time ago.
That you needed to have those local kids who weren't just playing at Nebraska or at Colorado, but for Nebraska, right? And that is exactly the mentality that I just don't see, the head coach of Colorado being able to pull together. Like you're seriously going to flip the entire roster, and you're going to have kids that what are they playing for? They're going to come in from all over the country. What are they playing for?
And what happens when they don't like it? What happens when you win 3 games your first year?
Well, not just that, like even if you put all of the mental parts of building a culture and building a team aside, put all of that aside, just from a logistics standpoint, how do you get them in? How do you get them used to your routine, which is a brand new routine for everybody anyways? Just getting them used to, like, okay, this is what time we practice. This is how we practice. This is right. And get those things done, much less, that entire team is not going to get to offense, defense, install until fall camp opens.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that and be ready to play their first game against a really good football team?
Yeah. TCU might take a job. I can't remember who I was talking with about it, but like, if you look at the Stars, they're getting, former 4-star recruits, whatever, that enter the portal, whatever, good for them. I hope things work out for them. But they're getting them all over at the skill position levels. And when you talk about like basic
skill positions, you mean the offensive?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, we share the same feeling about the term skill position, but it's just easier to label it that way.
Hate it.
But in terms of like scholarship numbers, and we talk, like we mentioned, basically a skeleton crew from what it was last year. You want to know how many of those people are linemen?
Like 3.
Looking at it legitimately, they have 10 scholarship linemen. What's going to happen when you play TCU with 10 scholarship linemen to open up?
And 2 of them get dinged up, at least, like a twisted ankle or something.
What happens when Marcus Satterfield, we're going to run the ball, use the fullback, happens? What's going to happen when Tony White's defense blitzes every single time against your
offensive linemen that have had just a few weeks to get to know each other, and we just started installing offense 2 weeks ago, making calls, knowing where the other. You didn't make it to the pipeline thing a while back, did you?
No, I did not.
You really would have enjoyed it, because I was listening to them talk, but one of the things that made them what they were was not just physical talent, but that they had been together working as a unit from their freshman year.
Yeah.
And every step along the way, they more or less did it together. Right. So they knew exactly what the guy next to them was going to do without saying anything. They were talking about, they even went so far as to make fake calls, because they knew the guy next to him would know that was bull, and right.
Yeah.
And that they would make fake calls to throw off the defense, because they knew each other so well that it didn't need to be said. It didn't need to be said, because they know what the other one's doing. They know what the other side of the line is doing. Right. And how, that's why I say, just from a logistics standpoint out of Colorado, how the hell are they going to get any kind of install in? I think they're going to get killed first half of the season.
They're going to add a couple more now, and then probably maybe but if you're depending on walk-ons and things, you're obviously not in good shape.
Oh, but even if they fill the amount of scholarships they have and bring people in, still you have to install an entire offense and an entire defense with nobody that has experience with it.
Yeah, Utah will run for 550 yards, and your entire offensive line and defensive line, for that matter, are going to absolutely not know what to do with themselves, because that will be one of the ugliest games. Utah will be able to name their score in that one.
Well, it'll just be dictated by how much time they bleed off the clock, right? I mean, games are going to be a little shorter this year with the new rules,
for sure.
But
yes, I want to follow that. I just wanted to add in, going back to trust, because this is something that we talked about, where like trust with teammates and trust with like that Tom Osborne clip that you showed me before, of like, there's something to be said about that, the drive and accountability for again, going back to Coach Garrett and what he had mentioned to us weeks ago, of like the extenuating forces and circumstances. Like, you want your motivation to be internal, not external forces, and that trust of working with teammates. It's a fascinating thing to see that mentality, and to see successful coaches such as Dr. Tom Osborne explain the force and the mentality and the drive and motivation behind being an incredibly physical and imposing team, whereas also not being like the underdog complex, or
the angry, hateful,
the bad boy Pistons complex that people want to put on.
Or, I mean, since we were talking about Colorado, I mean, that was how, was it McCartney or McCarthy? God, I get them mixed up.
McCarthy.
It was McCartney, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how when he was building Colorado, every year they circled Nebraska on the calendar.
Yeah.
And they hated Nebraska.
Still do.
And I know, and the thing that drove them nuts was they hated Nebraska, and Nebraska didn't hate them equally back.
Yeah.
Because they never took them until they really got there.
Yeah.
Nebraska never took them seriously. So Colorado has always had that inferiority complex. And this dovetails me into something else that I wanted to talk about. I think Iowa was the same way, right? For years, and they would play Iowa every once in a while, but for years, Nebraska was up here and Iowa was right here, where they always are, middle of the pack. Every once in a while, they hit lightning in a bottle and, would get to the big,
the Ricky Stanzi era, the Marvin McNutt time, yeah.
But so Iowa they had that Iowa and Iowa fans always had a little bit of that inferior complex when it came to Nebraska, and they hated us and Nebraska, and we just kind of looked at them like, oh, that's cute, guys. You just keep trying really hard, right?
Yeah.
Because, for most up until the last 10 years, Nebraska had scoreboard on Iowa continually,
right? and the trophies.
And ironically, when in the Big Ten and when they shuffled around divisions and stuff, everybody wanted, even the entire Big Ten wanted Nebraska Iowa to be a rivalry game, and it never really took hold until Nebraska got bad and worse than Iowa.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, now you see that rivalry has taken root, and even Nebraska fans are returning. You hear how much they haven't shut up about the game this year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You hear people all the time. Some of the guys on other podcasts talk about, I don't care what the record is next year, just beat Iowa. And that's okay, it's a rivalry now. But the funny part is, what I'm getting to is that it took Nebraska being bad for it to become a rivalry. It wasn't a case of that Iowa had to get good and come up to where Nebraska was. Nebraska had to come down to where Iowa was for it to become a rivalry.
And it's and here's the thing, it's such an in-steeped rivalry now, to the point where Husker fans would try to take shots at Caitlin Clark.
Right.
Because heaven forbid Iowa have a generational athlete in any sport whatsoever.
They've had a few generational, people in football and other sports, but the problem is they just don't have any trophies to go with it.
Right. Well, and they've amazing wrestling program, to be fair.
Well, that's true. The wrestling program has a lot of trophies.
Just a spectacular wrestling. But again, when they have a like Namesmith Player of the Year caliber women's basketball player who, statistically speaking, Iowa on the road drew more
Right.
of fans in attendance than any other like traveling Big Ten team on average.
Because the knowledgeable basketball fan knew what they were going to see.
And Caitlin Clark was exceptional and is still exceptional. She will be again. But like when they came to Pinnacle Bank Arena, Husker fans, first of all, you got to like taking in Caitlin Clark in person is special.
Right.
Rooting against her and Iowa at the same time. I mean,
well, you were talking about it. It's that Michael Jordan effect, right?
Yeah.
When he was on the road, they packed arenas because you now get to say, I watched MJ play. I watched the GOAT play. GOAT. I don't even want to hear any of that other crap. GOAT. GOAT, GOAT, GOAT. It's not even close. And that's for my son, by the way, Mitch. LeBron is not the GOAT. Anyways, back to what we were talking about.
Pete Maravich. No. Well, but that rivalry mentality I always enjoy because it brings out something in the fans. Like when we travel to games and we see a little something like, I just thought, how special would that have been? I mean, it's easy to think now looking back at it, but how special would that Michigan game have been last year if Nebraska was like a top rung division, like competing for the divisional title?
Right.
You'd have strong Husker fans that actually believe that they could compete with Michigan, who just made the playoff and made the playoff again.
Right.
Whole day, starts snowing, and it's just kind of drag out football. Like, I just thought that is the special, because again, full transparency here. That's a really awesome stadium, and Ann Arbor's a really cool town. If you have the chance, go there because it's awesome.
It was, yeah, that was one of the ones I know were still on my to get to one.
Could you imagine Nebraska being like a conference championship contender, playing Michigan, who is also a conference championship contender at the Big House? That's a special moment. And then it's kind of frigid. Snow starts coming down in the first quarter, and I just thought, the only thing it's missing is that one key component.
Relevance.
Yeah.
But for that game to like really mean something to both teams.
And it's a difficult wish to have now because the Big Ten's going to change with UCLA and USC and all of this stuff. But the relevance of Nebraska, or the presumed resurgence of Nebraska based upon its current trajectory, which obviously the promise of change has everybody drinking the Rule-8 or whatever you want to call it. But there is, statistically speaking, there's a lot of people, even outside of the state of Nebraska, and I've talked to them, that point to it and say, no, this is evidence. Like Nebraska's, they might not be national championship caliber in 3 years or playing for a national championship in 3 years, but they're going to be on their path at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like they're going to eventually get to that point at a certain point.
Writing?
I'll put it down in writing.
I mean, everybody right now is just like it's a testament to how far Husker Nation has fallen, that now we just want relevance.
Well, and like Rule has said numerous times, like there's no reason why they can't compete for national championships. Having been here,
they have the resources and they have all the support systems, and there's no reason.
I just think it's going to take it a couple of years, obviously, to get in the swing, to get the engine and the wheels churning to the point where it's not quite self-sustaining, but it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to hop on the interstate when you're coming in on the on-ramp rather than just putting the car in drive from park and saying, I'm going to hit 75 right away. You know what I mean?
Well, if you're going to do that, your car better be built for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which mine is not, but
yeah, my truck is like driving a brick.
Right. Is rivalry, because rivalry, mentality, drive, which kind of carried that thread from Colorado on over, which I don't even, in the future of the Big Ten, they'll still have Iowa. Presumably UCLA they're going to play in pods, and UCLA is going to be with Nebraska, potentially with Iowa as well.
Initially. Well, they're going to have to keep that because now it's become a thing.
Right.
Now that Nebraska has fallen far enough, it's become a thing.
Well, but the issue that you're going to have is,
I mean, it would almost be like, it's not as storied, but you can't take that rivalry away now.
yeah, it's where they wanted it to be when Nebraska joined the Big Ten. I just wonder, well, I mean, the scheduling is going to be so odd in the sense of just new, like the odd circumstances of newness, same as joining the Big Ten. Like, you're going to have Nebraska play Rutgers in a conference game. What is this? Kind of thing. So it'll take some getting used to, but at the same time, I know Nebraska's played UCLA and had some great games over the years. They played in the Rose Bowl and had some great games over the years, or memorable games over the years. I just don't think that, and they played USC. Like I personally, it's going to be take some getting used to. But in terms of rivalry, if you're telling me like Nebraska's going to compete for national championships in a decade, or more reliably speaking, if the level hits 9 wins again and eventually competes for a conference championship or a division crown, whatever that looks like, in a couple of years, you're telling me that games against Iowa are still going to be competitive, and then you're telling me that Nebraska fans aren't going to get hyped up for Penn State. Matt Rule will get hyped up for Penn State.
Nebraska.
UCLA,
Nebraska fans
Michigan,
of at least my age and older will still get hyped up for Penn State because we still haven't forgotten about the catch 5 yards out of bounds.
And I can imagine that a lot of Husker fans are still going to get hyped up for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin's, because when Nebraska came into the Big Ten, there was that whole, which one's going to be the rivalry? Is it going to be the Iowa right across the river? Or is it going to be Barry Alvarez up in Wisconsin, Nebraska 2.0?
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, everything he did up there is Nebraska 2.0.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but for some reason, while it's a big game and there's tremendous respect, it doesn't feel like when we would go up to Madison to cover Nebraska up there, it didn't have the same feel. It was like playing football against your cousin, right? Where you want to win the game, but you just can't hate them.
You have different cousins than me.
Well, I don't hate my cousins, so. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where the whole thing with Iowa and the proximity and the sniping back and forth and fans intermingling in these areas along the river where we touch each other all the time, and there's a lot of back and forth. I think it's actually taking on a rivalry thing
for sure.
Right? And it's not quite Red River rivalry, but it's pretty. I don't know. Maybe it's pretty close because there's a lot of animosity right now between the two.
For sure. I mean, and Iowa City and Madison, both really cool towns. I'd also like to get that on record. I like both of those towns. But I like
Madison.
Madison is really cool. I will say my biggest reservation from Nebraska, Iowa, and the rivalry that it's become and how it's looking is I really regret and really still hold grudges against whoever is responsible for naming it. Not that the Heroes Trophy and Heroes Game isn't good. I love all that stands for and everything, but I had coined the term of what I thought it should be when they had it, and nobody listened to my suggestion, and nobody took it.
What was it?
The barn burner.
The barn burner. Isn't that a little too on the nose?
Hey, look, man. You put it on a tee, I'll knock it out.
Might as well just between the two states. You might as well just call it the corn trophy.
Well, I mean, Husker fans could have really got got some juice out of that one too.
Right?
You know what I mean? But come on, barn burner.
Big golden corn cob on a trophy would have been.
Yeah. But isn't that kind of what it makes college football unique and great? I mean, people talk about like the portal and free agency and all of this is making it feel like professional sports again. I understand that there are rivalries in the NFL. I get that, but there's something about those rivalries of college football that's just different.
Right. And maybe this is something we touch on in the future with somebody or maybe just sometime you and I talk about it. College football still, even with everything, still has a very distinct vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like, I can remember in a previous life covering the Huskers in the 90s, I can remember driving out to, this is when I drove to everything, but, like driving out to, they were playing in Indiana or something.
Champaign-Urbana.
Yeah, but I was driving out.
South
I
Bend.
was driving out in the middle of southern Illinois and Indiana, flat.
Yeah, that's
Everybody
rough.
says Nebraska's no. Yeah. That is like the telephone pole is the highest thing. It is flat.
Yeah,
and
it's rough.
Yeah, but I'm driving through after the game because they had played an afternoon game. So I'm driving through the country, listening to some random college game. I don't even remember the one I could get on the radio station. And it just has it just had a vibe of college football. You roll up into Madison, Wisconsin, you roll into Chicago, Northwestern, or you roll into, any of these,
even Minneapolis.
right. But you roll up on that stadium and it has a vibe that a pro team just doesn't have.
Yeah.
Right. And
Happy Valley.
And it's everything. It's
Michigan.
It's the fans. It's the energy. I think it's the band. I think having the college bands is
Ohio State.
Oh my God. But just having them there doing their thing gets you that vibe. And like I said, with even with the transfer portal and it becoming almost a minor league to the pros, college football still has a vibe and a fandom and a following it's not the same with the pros with NFL.
No, and the NCAA and college football, by nature, the NCAA is facing, I don't want to get into all the legal issues, but their main legal issue is antitrust because it commands the market. NCAA, let's all be honest here and say it together, commands the market in terms of feeder to the NFL.
Well, the SEC and the Big Ten do.
Fair, but if you want to play in the NFL, you have to go through college football and the NCAA to do it. Essentially,
nobody is skipping straight from high school to NFL.
Exactly. So, transfer portal, free agency, people not having that allegiance to their school, whatever, put on whatever. Things happen. I'm not. If a kid wants to be empowered to go make a move, wants to do what's right for him, more power to him. If a coach, at the same time, if a player is going to advocate for that, but then a coach is going to say, well, we can cut you because if you're not good enough, then I'm like, I take exception with that. But if the player also wants to have their own agency in this while not directly getting paid, but compensated for their name, image, and likeness, that's fine. But to double down on your point, I would rival anybody who wants to make an argument for it to show up for like a Nebraska Unity Walk and then take in that environment and walk into a stadium 20 minutes before kickoff as the stands are filing in. You've got a pizza and a hot dog and you got a kid on one arm and you're walking them in and you see that stadium, you see the warm up, you see the band playing, people pledged out in the colors. You've got people like homecoming that come back 25, 30 years later that come back because it means so much to them to be a part of the program. Even now, like Randy Gregory is a really good example I like to point to. There's a guy who was a junior college athlete and he obviously did a lot for his career at Nebraska. Nebraska means a lot to him. Just now with the Matt Rule coaching staff, he came back and has been welcomed back, and now they want to make Nebraska a welcoming place for former Huskers that made the NFL.
There's a novel idea.
Right. But even then, that means something to them. Regardless of portal, whatever you want to be, if they're good at Nebraska and they feel that love from the fans in a way that very few other football programs in the country offer, and then they have a successful NFL career because their coaches and fans and everybody cheered for them and supported them in college, and they go there. Mm-hmm. Nebraska is eternal in ways that just can't be replicated by other NFL programs on a consistent basis. Obviously you have some lifers that, like Jim McMahon and Mike Ditka being bleeding heart, Chicago Bears, things like that. But on a whole scale. That's what college football offers. And I think it's like going back to kind of one thing that Matt says is developing young men and making good men for this world. One thing that we talked to Rob about with developing young men, that's something that this offers and college football offers. It's just immensely different than anything else.
Yeah. Well, the coaches that, my own personal opinion, that are doing it the quote unquote right way are the ones that are trying to build better young men. Right.
Yeah.
Because I just firmly believe that if you do that, then the football kind of takes care of itself. The football program takes care of itself with very little guidance. When you get that player buy-in. So, all right, let's transition, because I don't want to get out of here without hitting on some photo stuff. You had what did you want to ask?
Yes.
Right.
Kind of in terms of like a framing, not so much in like framing whatever shot, but at what do you look for going into a practice or a game? What angle are you looking for? What, in terms of like telling the story of the game, or just what makes a really good photo, one thing that appeals to you? How are you looking to sit, or at what angle and what position do you want to be in order to make that to use your position as a way to frame the photo that you want to take?
Well, there's a lot in there to unpack. That it ties in a lot with something you'll hear me talk about a lot, which is your backgrounds, right? And that's where those angles come into play. Sports is inherently an unpredictable and somewhat chaotic thing to take pictures of, but you can help yourself by choosing angles and positioning to hopefully incorporate or improve backgrounds. Like when I did the tennis spread not too long ago, somewhat boring backgrounds. They had some interesting scoreboards between each thing, and I spent a considerable amount of time trying to frame things up just right to try and make an interesting thing that incorporated the scoreboard. I do that with stadiums too. When I go to a new football stadium, for instance, trying to figure out if there were going to be things in the background that were going to be a problem, and where I could position myself to minimize that problem, or if there were elements in the background that were great, where I could position myself to either minimize or take advantage of some of those things. And a lot depends on the sport. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was shooting baseball. I spent the entire game like moving around every 2 innings or so.
Yeah.
I did some here, and I did some here, and I did some here, and I did some in the outfield, and I'd like make a complete loop around the stadium over the course of 9 innings. So it looks like I got like somebody commented on one of my posts with the photos was, Jesus, looks like you're everywhere. And that's if you can do that if you move around.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of sports photographers get caught up. They get caught up, and you've heard me talk about this before. They get caught up and get worried about missing something. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be afraid of missing that double play at second base, the turning two, or not having a good angle on the batter, or they get so caught up in being afraid of missing something that they don't explore the space a little bit and try and find new angles. I do that during basketball season too. About halfway through basketball season, I'm completely bored with sitting in that little square on the floor and only viewing the game from right here. I'll go up and sit in the stands over here, or I'll go spend 20 minutes up on the upper levels and shooting down, or we get the opportunity to go up in the catwalks, and I'll spend an entire half if I get an opportunity like that. But you just have to move around, and not moving around in like chasing the last photo you missed, because you've heard me talk about that before, but just trying to look at things differently and find different angles to shoot things. That's super important for me. But then the flip side of that is like at Memorial Stadium. At Memorial Stadium, I don't move around a lot because the angles we have to shoot from on the sidelines are problematic. And sometimes we have a lot of people on the sidelines, which makes it even more problematic. So I usually shoot from the end zones, right? Big lenses, teleconverters, all those things to extend my reach. And so at like in Memorial Stadium, I don't move around. But when you see me, we go to Illinois or, you know, just about any other Big Ten school, you know. Rutgers was nice. Purdue's got good movement.
Rutgers, you basically had a playground there.
Well, yeah, because there were like 3 of us there.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there were like 3 of us from the Nebraska media and like 3 or 4 people from local media. And that was it. We had the sidelines, but there was plenty of room. There's lots of options, and it's not the same at home. So in Lincoln, I don't move a whole lot, but when I go on the road, I move around a lot more because the opportunity is there to do that. Did I even remotely get to answering your question? Or did I just complete? This is the day of rambling.
Yeah.
This is rambling. The title for this one is Ramble On.
Yeah, Ramble.
That's got to be the title.
All right. Well,
that's a Led Zeppelin reference too. One of my favorite bands.
I mean, they're great, but also like that song is like 50 years old now.
That's a great song.
It is a great song, but like I equated it to because for the NFL draft, Motley Crue was there and they played Kickstart My Heart.
Right.
And it was like, all right, like Vince Neil, this might be the last time you sing the song.
He's past his prime.
And you put it down. But I'm like, the people there enjoy it, but that song is now, it would be like if Jefferson Airplane performed Somebody to Love.
What, like 20
Kickstart My Heart? It's like 35 years old.
Yeah, it would be like 35, wouldn't it? Because it was mid-'80s.
It would be like
85.
If Jefferson Airplane played Flower Power ballads the day that Tom Brady got drafted. That's the kind of time difference we're talking here.
Right.
It just blew my mind. I'm like,
but you know what? It's super popular with the kids, though. I mean, go
super popular.
Go to a high school wrestling match when they do their walk up, or high school base when they're starting to do walk up songs now. You'll hear "Kickstart My Heart" at least once.
Well,
at least once.
I mean, that makes sense to a certain point because even now, like you go to even Memorial Stadium and like when I was a kid and now 10, 12 years later, 15 years later, you're hearing the same 4 AC/DC songs all over again. And it's just because I'm firmly convinced there is no other format or any other situation to listen to an AC/DC song than at a sporting event. I don't think it exists.
My truck.
Real. That's surprising to me because I think if you Spotify searched AC/DC in just a quiet room by yourself, 404, it just not be found. It has to be found in groups of large people gathered together for some sort of mammoth movement of people and energy.
Pretty sure it's in my iTunes. I know for a fact it is.
All right, I'll concede that point, but not willingly.
Probably in your iTunes too, I'm going to bet. Right?
Yeah.
All right, so did I even answer your question?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
where we were going?
Yeah, because you kind of mentioned the framing, like at the tennis match, framing the scoreboards and things. You have a clean background or something you want in your background, and if you kind of,
I harp on people a lot about their backgrounds.
Yeah.
Because backgrounds are an important part of the photo. If you do it correctly, it can add context. It doesn't have to be just something that we've shot in a way that completely blurred it out. Sometimes it can be context. It can actually, that background can be the picture. And I've mentioned it before, the from Michigan State this last year, right? I happen to be on the side of the field and they kick the ball over and the guy's running down by himself. And I immediately just decide, because the guy's running away from me, so I can't see his face at all. So I just focus to the background.
Yeah.
And there's the way it laid out, there was all the stands, right, and people were losing their freaking minds. And sometimes the background is the picture. And that's just, I don't know if it's instinct or experience or a combination of all of it, but I just made a split second decision and switched my focus to the background as he ran on into the end zone, and it worked. But so yeah, sometimes backgrounds are an important part of the picture, and sometimes they are the picture. So, was there anything else we needed to cover?
Nah. Wrap this puppy
Should we
up.
wrap this ramble on? We'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for coming in one more time and putting up with our rambling today. I think we covered way more than we thought we were going to be covering when we came in here today. I'm Eric. This is Brady. This has been the Eye Test. Don't forget to share it, like it, subscribe to it, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.
A Hurrdat Sports Network production.